I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is why dating apps are making it harder to date. So if you weren't aware, you should know that I published my first book just a few days ago. It's called The Value of Others, and it's the product of nearly 10 years of deep critical thinking and research on the subject of mating and dating. Basically, I attempt to provide a single model to explain the behavior of both men and women in the sexual marketplace, which is no easy task. The book is not a recapitulation of ideas I've already presented on this channel. It's overwhelmingly new content, and I don't expect to discuss this content on the channel moving forward. However, to give my audience a taste of what's in the book, I'm going to put out a few episodes that touch on ideas you'll find within its pages. This is one of them. So if you like what you hear, you might consider buying the ebook, the audiobook, or the paperback version of the book, links in the description below. And be sure to listen to the end of this episode for the kicker. All right, so lots of people struggle on dating apps for lots of different reasons, which can be surprising, as the idea that dating apps are actually making it harder to date is counterintuitive. On some level, it's never been easier in the history of the world to have direct access to more potential mates than it is today. You just switch on the magic rectangle you carry around in your pocket and boom, you instantly have access to thousands of single and not so single people in your area, ostensibly looking for love. In fact, we've seen a dramatic uptick in the proportion of couples who met online in the past decade. 10 years ago, about 20% of American couples met online. Now it's around 50%. So most couples now meet online, and that frequency has more than doubled in just the past 10 years. However, across that same time period, we've seen an equally dramatic downturn in the frequency of all kinds of sexual relationships. Over the past decade, fewer people are getting married, fewer people are getting into relationships, and surprisingly, fewer people are even hooking up. Some of these numbers are at historically unprecedented lows. So while it's only a correlative finding, it's highly suggestive. The more people rely on dating apps for sexual relationships of all kinds, the fewer sexual relationships are actually transacted. So why might that be? It's not the whole story, but I'm going to advance a simple economic argument to explain why dating apps unintentionally create fewer relationships. It kind of goes like this. In the sexual marketplace, men are fundamentally attempting to exchange resources for sexual opportunity, and women are fundamentally attempting to exchange their sexual opportunity for resources. In many respects, the incentives of men and women are actually antagonistic to each other. That is, men attempt to get as much sexual opportunity for as few resources as possible, and women generally attempt to secure as many resources for as little sexual opportunity as possible. And the negotiation phase of any courtship process, no matter how brief or extended, is functionally an attempt to suss out who gets what for how much. And just like in the commercial marketplace, the perception of supply and demand interacts with this fundamental reality in the sexual marketplace. Let's first consider the experience on a dating app from the man's perspective. Within his subjectivity, when he engages with an app, he is one man interacting with a functionally infinite number of women. He neither perceives nor interacts with any other men, so he encounters no intersexual competition on an app. It's just him and an endless supply of women, which gives him the impression that it's a buyer's market. Just like in a commercial marketplace, apparently playing with fewer buyers than sellers drives down the cost of the proposed transaction. As a result, men reasonably come to believe that somewhere in the sea of infinite optionality is a more attractive option who will be willing to transact her sexual opportunity for fewer resources. And he's right. There is. Just like in a global economy, there is always someone who will be willing to do the same job for less money. In the unregulated sexual economy, there is always a woman who will be willing to transact her sexual opportunity for fewer resources. Ultimately, this creates a race to the bottom. in which a greater proportion of men are emboldened to transact directly for women's sexual opportunity for little to no resources in exchange. Men's subjective perception on dating apps, in combination with rational economic principles, creates the fuckboy phenomenon. From his perspective, given the ratio of buyers to sellers, he should be able to secure sex at bargain basement prices. And he's not necessarily wrong. Now, before I go any further, if you're liking what you're hearing, please consider sending this episode to someone who might benefit from its message, because it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow. You can also hit the thanks button and tip me in proportion to the value you feel you've derived from this episode. I'm also writing original content for my free newsletter every week. If you'd like to sign up, you can do so on my website. Finally, please fill out an inquiry form on my website if you're interested in booking a paid consultation. The links to everything are in the description below. Please check them out. This is how you can support this channel and its mission. All right, let's get back to it. Next, let's now consider the experience on a dating app from the woman's perspective. Within her subjectivity, when she engages with an app, she is one woman interacting with a functionally infinite number of men. She neither perceives nor interacts with any other women, so she encounters no intersexual competition on the app. It's just her and an endless supply of men, many of whom are apparently extremely eager to transact for her opportunity, which gives her the impression that it's a seller's market. Just like in a commercial marketplace, apparently playing with fewer sellers than buyers drives up the proposed transaction. As a result, women reasonably come to believe that somewhere in the sea of infinite optionality is a more attractive option who will be willing to transact more resources for the same sexual opportunity. And she's right. There is. Just like in a global economy, there is always someone who will be willing to pay more for the same good somewhere, which is the principle that makes mercantilism or geo-arbitrage possible. In the unregulated sexual economy, there is always a man who will be willing to transact more resources for a given sexual opportunity. Ultimately, this creates hyperinflation, in which a greater proportion of women are emboldened to transact for men's resources for little to no sexual opportunity. Women's subjective perception on dating apps, in combination with rational economic principles, creates the gold digger phenomenon. From her perspective, given the ratio of sellers to buyers, she should be able to command a premium for her sexual opportunity, and she's not necessarily wrong. And just to be clear, any woman who comes right out of the gate asking for a committed relationship is on the gold digger spectrum. Like, I can understand why women are insulted when men just proposition them for sex. From a woman's perspective, such men are trying to get value for nothing. However, women demanding a significant relationship up front is even more ludicrous, as male commitment is far more expensive than female sexual opportunity in today's dating market. From men's perspective, such women are trying to get a lot of value for nothing. So what's the upshot? Because of the differences in their subjective experiences while using dating apps, and because of the differences in their gendered incentives to engage in the sexual marketplace, what ends up happening is that men and women are growing increasingly divergent in their valuations of sex and commitment. Men think sex should cost this much. Women think sex should cost this much. And they're both right, at least within their respective subjectivities. But here's the thing. When people get too far away from each other in terms of valuation, they can't do business with each other. If one side wants to buy for $1 and the other wants to sell for $1 million, they're not going to meet in the middle, since the middle is just too far away from either one of their anchorings. In fact, one of the fundamental principles of the book is that people enter into relationships by transacting unequal goods of comparable value. The more incomparable the valuations, the less likely the relationship. And if the two parties are too far away from each other in terms of their valuations, then there are no grounds for a negotiation at all, so nothing gets transacted. Practically speaking, this would mean to a significant reduction This would lead to a significant reduction in all forms of sexual relationships, from marriages to one-night stands. And this would only make sense if men attempt to secure sexual opportunity for resources in the sexual marketplace, and women attempt to secure resources for sexual opportunity in the same. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the episode. So, what's the kicker? The kicker is that the idea presented in this episode constitutes just 3 paragraphs of my 432-page book. Another way to say the same thing is that my book, The Value of Others, is equivalent to 500 unreleased, full-length PsycHacks episodes. It's packed full of unflinching truths about the sexual marketplace and the game of mating and dating. So if you like what you heard here today, I would highly encourage you to get your hands on a copy. Again, the links are in the description. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your support, and thank you for listening.